Right. A few days ago, X was banned in Brazil. And this was the outcome of a feud that has lasted for a long time now between Elon Musk and Alexander de Moraes, who is one of the judges in Brazil. And I think it is obvious that it's not just one judge. There's a whole Brazilian government behind him. Right, here we have this post. Bolsonaro is speaking about the Brazilian Supreme Court banning X and VPNs. X being forced out of Brazil is yet another hard blow to our freedom. Today we woke up without X, and they once accused me of being a dictator. This is interesting because I remember some time ago there was one progressive, so-called progressive I knew, who just instantly out of nowhere just said, obviously we're supporting Lula. Said, no, there's nothing's obvious about it. Just why should I support Lula or something?
Wait,
Just
what are his policies?
They're socialist, aren't they?
I think, sort of borderline communist or something. Just not my cup of tea. Right, here we have the main antagonist in this case. We have Alexander de Moraes, who is...
He does look uniquely evil, doesn't he? Just to throw it out there.
Yes.
Save everyone commenting on
Brazil's Supreme Federal Court minister. They say that he looks like a supervillain. We are going to say a bit more than that, because a lot of people have focused on how he looks like.
Daft Potato, yeah.
Anyone that's bald gets accused of being a supervillain. Sometimes I get that. I look like a Bond villain or something. Like, I don't know what they mean by that, but...
Maybe you have a cat and you're stroking the cat. They're a white cat with a blue and green eye.
It's that big red button that you press and the floor falls through.
Yeah.
Mr. Burns, that's what does it.
So we have an article here by Huffington Post. You could read it, and basically it says that there's a long feud going for about a month now. And what happened is that de Moraes asked Elon to ban and suspend some accounts and name a representative. Elon declined that. As we will see in due course, one of the persons that the judge asked Elon to censor is a senator, a Brazilian senator. So it's definitely political censoring. And basically, at some point, Elon didn't appoint a representative. De Moraes gave him a 24 hours deadline. Elon didn't do anything. And basically, he said that we are going to ban X from Brazil. And a lot of people are using VPNs to enter X. And they say that we are going to impose a fine of around $8,900 daily to people who use VPN, people and businesses who use VPN to access.
So there's a couple of things to be said here. The first thing is that the legal representative for X, or for Elon, that seemed like they were trying to get Elon to offer up a sacrificial lamb, basically, as my understanding. And two, anyone that wants to ban VPNs does not have your best interests at heart. They want to ban you anonymously accessing stuff, as is your right. You have a right to a private life under pretty much every form of constitution ever. And if people don't want that, then they're out to harm you.
Exactly. And I think the same goes with censorship at large, because people who want to deprive us of speech and of the right to speak also want to deprive us of the right to point out abuse of power. So
this is pretty much news to me. I'd heard rumblings, seen a few headlines, but to hear that Brazil, there's just a blanket ban on all VPNs, any type of VPN, a blanket fine if you use one. Is that right?
Fine is for people who, not for people who use VPN, but for people who use VPN to access X.
Right, okay. So still a blanket ban of Twitter, though?
Yes, yeah.
That is definitely
dictatorial.
Like, dictatorial censorship.
The Terry Gilliam film is looking all the more sort of prophetic now, isn't it?
Yeah. We have here a former judge of the Brazilian Supreme Court who said basically that she was the first and only active judge in Brazil to denounce the abuses of the court. And she says essentially that it was clear that what would happen if de Moraes continued in his position would be loss in freedoms. And you can see her here. She's talking about de Moraes and how the Brazilian Supreme Court can be weaponized against people's freedoms. Right, we have here Michael Schellenberger talking about about thousands of Brazilians resisting the orders and using VPNs to access X. And we also have here someone in Brazil who is very open about using VPNs. We have here Marcel Van Hatten, who is a political and scientist and journalist, and he is basically saying that this tweet may cost me almost $10,000, but I am tweeting this with VPN, and he is essentially saying that the government is acting in a very censorious and authoritarian manner. So I think that's a brave post. It's a brave post.
Yeah.
Right. We have here also Michael Schellenberger saying that what is particularly interesting is that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have made virtually zero statements about this. I wonder why.
Yeah, what a surprise.
What a surprise.
Well, obviously this works in their favour, doesn't it? It damages Elon's reputation, and it's one of the arms of, the regime that aren't explicitly controlled, because of course we know that the FBI, for example, is politically partisan because they've repeatedly ruled in favour of the Democrats, and they were in communication with all of the social media companies to suppress things like the Hunter Biden laptop story, which they lied about being Russian disinformation, as well as a whole host of other things, that Fauci parody accounts being taken down during the pandemic, even though they were parody accounts. Just anything that could potentially damage the reputation of the regime and their schemes was suppressed. So This is great for them.
There are definitely vested interests on a global level to bring down X, because X is one of the platforms of free speech, and you can use free speech to point out abuses of power. And we see throughout the world, especially in the Western world, because in the non-Western world, things are a bit more authoritarian by nature, I think. It's not a weird thing to say. We see, especially in the Western world, a very organized effort to do this. And a very organized effort to criticize and demonize anyone who would point out abuses of power as, far-right racists and extremists and whatever. Right, so there are two things here that arise, two issues that need to be discussed. And obviously I'm no legal expert, and I'm not going to be commenting about the issues and intricacies of Brazilian law, but one question here is the question of whether Brazilian law has been violated by X. And the other question is obviously the not insignificant question of free speech, which we will talk about during the end of the segment. So we have here a lot of people who are saying that Elon already has violated Brazilian law. And there is a whole host of people, celebrities and all sorts of intellectuals, especially Guardian types.
Mark Ruffalo,
yeah,
a famous intellectual.
We'll go to Guardian in the next slide.
Mark Ruffalo, steeped in political theory.
Yeah. I mean, the political theory of of contemporary left isn't that weird to get steeped into. Yeah, they really bring down intellectuals to the level of people who have are not initiated into the ways of thinking. But Mark Ruffalo say here essentially that he's a weird and entitled billionaire tech bro, tax him heavily. And what I want to say is I find this particularly appalling because all these, sensitive leftist progressive types, they constantly make it, especially when they're talking about Latin America, and they do so also when it comes to Venezuela. They claim to speak in favor of the people, but they constantly reduce all questions to dilemmas between the government of a Latin American country and someone from outside. So for instance, in Venezuela, they constantly talk about the Venezuelan people, but they reduce everything to a question of US versus Maduro. And here they reduce everything to a question of Elon versus Brazilian government.
Well, if you make a distinction between the people and the people who rule them, it weakens the power that they have over them, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And that's why in mainstream media, you constantly hear people saying Brazil rather than the Brazilian government, and do so the same for any country in order to blur the lines between the state and the people.
I'm not represented in my parliament, so why would anyone else be?
Yeah. We have here Robert Reich in The Guardian. Now he's talking about it. He says he may be the richest man in the world, but that doesn't mean we're powerless to stop him. And essentially he's saying that X has been used to spread disinformation, hatred. He's talking about how X was used in England during the Southport tragedies and what came afterwards. Essentially, he says that he's rapidly transforming his enormous wealth, he's the richest person in the world, into a huge source of unaccountable political power that's now backing Trump and other authoritarians around the world. I find this very appalling and one-sided for one reason, because when it comes to I really hate the bigotry of people who call themselves anti-authoritarians, because I call myself an anti-authoritarian as well. But one of the tests I use to see if someone is really honest about it is to see if they care about authoritarianism from both sides. So you have people right now who constantly focus on the duties of people, whether they're rich or not. They constantly focus on the duties of the governed, and they constantly try to say that anyone who insists that those who govern do have duties to their own people is a far-right extremist and a racist. When they do this, no, they're absolutely not against authoritarianism. They're pro their own authoritarianism.
Of course, yeah, that Robert Reich is an absolute scumbag. Mentalist, an actual mentalist. Right? Oh, he's worried about Trump and authoritarians around the world. I don't hear him saying anything about Xi Jinping. Can't remember the last time he said anything about the authoritarianism in China.
Yeah.
Well, that's where he gets his economics from, because he's certainly no economist that I respect.
No, it's just pure partisan.
He uploads to Twitter all the time as well, so that the notion that it's something evil, and yet he's on there posting his nonsense.
You constantly see that. We saw also with Ian Dunt, and who was the other...
Careful how you pronounce his name.
I use that D. Okay?
That's getting cropped out of context.
Paul Mason, all these people, they constantly focus on the responsibilities of people to obey the government, irrespective of whether the laws and decrees are sensible. And they always say that anyone who would dare to insist that governments do have responsibilities towards their own people is a bad person. And I think that they are bad people.
They're filth.
Yeah. Right. So Elon here is responding to some people who are again saying that somehow Brazilian law has been violated. And he has set up an account, or not necessarily Elon, but he has marketed it and pointed people's attention to it, called Alexander Files. That is an account that is specifically dedicated to criticizing Alexander de Moraes. Okay? It says this account will reveal the unlawful directive issues to X by Alexander de Moraes. And they have here something that is really interesting, and they're saying, look at the order from de Moraes in the left, and also the law of Brazil in the right. Now they have this in Portuguese, which I think is the language of Brazil, but I do remember that there was a translated version. Right, so there is an ongoing dispute also about whether Brazilian law has been violated or not, and whether the decrees
by X,
and also the other side insists that perhaps it is the decrees of de Moraes that go against the laws of Brazil, but also the spirit of the laws of any free country, or any country that wants to call itself free. Right, so we have here something else. A lot of people are criticizing Elon for allegedly doxing the accounts he didn't want to suspend. But I think that there may be another way to look at it, because if we point out here, we will see that there is the order of the Supreme Court and the 7 accounts followed by names. Now, the issue here is that I wouldn't necessarily call that doxing when it comes to the government, because the government already has the names of these people. And with respect to plenty of them, they asked for specific names. So the government already knew. Now, speaking of that, I don't know exactly if this is the best way to go about it. Maybe they could have blurred the names or something. That's just a question to put out, because I want to show you a lot of the staff.
Sorry, just to be clear, the names of who? What?
The
who are we talking
accounts in
about?
which the Brazilian judiciary wanted censored, I think.
Yes, you see
Right.
here we have
Right,
the
okay.
Supreme Tribunal Federal, and they are saying essentially that they want to ban these accounts.
So this is the Brazilian government asking Elon to yeet these people.
Yes,
Right,
and,
okay,
and they
got it,
already have the names of these people.
Right.
Now, I don't know if with the account maybe they could have blurred the names or something, because obviously in Brazil there are people who are pro the government, and maybe the safety of these people is at stake. This is just something to bear in mind. Right, here we go to the... So what I wanted to say with this section is that it isn't by any means obvious that X has violated Brazilian law, as a lot of people want to make us think. Now we go to the issue of free speech, which isn't particularly small, I think. And I would say that essentially calls for censoring free speech are calls for criminalizing the means by which people can expose actual and potential abuses of power by governments. So if people are censorious, yeah, I'm not going to show mercy. I'm not going to be well disposed towards them, because when they want to deprive me of the means of exposing their actual or potential abuses of power, well, I just don't trust them.
Well, what it fundamentally boils down to is the enemies of ordinary people using their elected power to silence any criticism that would be of concern to ordinary people. It's antithetical to this notion of representative democracy.
Yes. And it's not just an issue of theory. We also see how it plays out here in Europe. We live there every day. People who just dare to say that governments have responsibilities towards us, towards their own people, we're branded as bad people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's appalling. We have here ADF says that the state of freedom of expression in Brazil is dire. Censorship has been normalized, and there are widespread unlawful restrictions of online speech and criminal proceedings to chill and penalize online expression by journalists, influencers, and politicians.
Can I make a broader point?
Yeah, of course.
Broadly speaking, censorship doesn't work, certainly not for very long. If you look at some of the most censorious societies that have ever been, perhaps Maoist era China or Stalinist era Soviet Union, or even if you go back centuries, go back to sort of the papal states at the height of their censorship against Luther or something. It might work briefly if you really crack down on it, really crack down, smash up any means of reprinting the information and kill anyone that found propagating it and stuff. Okay, maybe for a bit. But eventually, the truth will out, nearly always.
Yeah.
We know what happened in Maoist era China now. We know all the crimes of Stalin, really. We know all the attempts that failed for censorship throughout the centuries, more or less. They're not going to be able to do it. Even if Twitter disappeared, Elon and Twitter disappeared tomorrow, it's not going to stop people exchanging information. Again, if you look at the Soviet Union, perhaps a bit after Stalin, it's a very, 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 very censorious police state.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop people, underground journalists, it doesn't stop people talking. So they're not going to be able to do it. The Brazilian government's not going to be able to stop people from exchanging information, from noticing reality and talking about it amongst themselves, whether online or not.
The thing that comes to mind is that a lot of Western governments are doing this, and they obviously know that this doesn't work because we've got so many examples throughout history. And part of me has been entertaining the idea that maybe they only need it to work for the short term and it won't matter by the time people find out.
Maybe. And also a counterpoint just to against what I just said there.
Yeah.
On some level, it can work quite well. For example, the laptop from hell. If they can censor it in just enough, cast just enough doubt in people's mind for a window of time, then it can achieve some of its aims.
An intended effect that we can't go into because of certain guidelines on places where this goes out. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure.
You're right. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Don't want to get us in trouble.
Here we have a counter argument to what I just said. They have from Creaky News, and they say that the arrest of Telegram's CEO and Brazil's ban of X are more about tech companies flaunting their unchecked power than they are about freedom of speech. Now, one thing, you could say that to a level, obviously, the more power you have, the more you can abuse it. But the same goes for mainstream outlets and governments. So that's very one-sided. When people who say, obviously, the more power you have, and if you are the world's richest man, you do have power. And it doesn't mean that you always necessarily use it for good. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. But the thing is that what is interesting here is that a lot of mainstream outlets and a lot of governments are attacking Elon's X and Elon Musk personally, in this case. And in doing so, yet again, they are making it all about the responsibilities of people towards governments, never about governments towards their own people. The question of what responsibilities and duties governments have towards their own people is being completely thrown away by this rhetoric. Yes, the more power you have, the more you can use it, and the more you can use it for better or worse.
I trust Elon Musk more than I trust my government.
Same, because because he hasn't tried to censor me.
And I don't exactly trust Elon Musk that much, to be fair.
Yeah, obviously. So just being pro Elon Musk here doesn't mean that you have to be a fanboy saying that Elon Musk can do no wrong. Mm-hmm. Anyone with power that can do right or wrong.
Of course.
Seems to me, sorry.
No,
it does seem to me very clear that what's going on here is simply that Elon isn't towing the line, the message.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's not on board with their megalomania, whatever it is. Whatever the grand plan is to censor the whole world, certainly the West, or even Brazil, or most of the world, actually. He's not on board with that program. Yeah. It's just as simple as that. If he was pliant, a bit more like Zuck, or someone even more pliant than that, then there wouldn't be this outrage. There wouldn't be a problem.
Exactly, yeah.
Would there? So it's simply that, isn't it?
They want to make alternative media into an extension of mainstream media. We have here the one meme to end with. Brazil is facing a censorship crisis that threatens our democracy, free speech, and the checks and balances between the branches of government. And what I want to say here is that it's just, it is ironic, but to be expected at this point, because leftists are constantly talking about democracy and their democracy. But you can't have democracy without dialogue. And you don't have to think that democracy even is the best system to say this. You can't have democracy without dialogue. You can't have dialogue without free speech. So if you are against free speech, you're against democracy. It's just as simple as that. And here we have by Royce Jacob, again pointing out that there is a globally synchronized operation of people who are basically saying Elon Musk and X is a threat to our democracy, meaning that our is something quite different than what the people would use to say. Because it's an our democracy that excludes people. And we see this because all of these people are constantly trying to tell us that if we demand things from the government, if we constantly saying that the government has duties towards us, we are brandished as bad people.
Have these people even read Locke?
No.
The social contract.
Good vintage Carl Benjamin quote there.
The responsibilities of government, have they even?
I don't think so, but some of them may have, but they have the Marxist interpretation.
Yeah, it's like the Rousseauian version of Locke, where the government can do anything. Actually,
yes, yeah, right. So before we finish this segment, we have a brilliant announcement to make. The Islander merch is not going to be for long with us anymore. So you have about a week to enter a website and this link we have here and watch our wonderful merch. And we have t-shirts, we have mugs, we have posters, brilliant stuff. Do check them.
I also have that t-shirt and wear it myself outside of work.
And we have all kinds of sizes. We have small, medium, large, XL, 2XL, 3XL.
It's a late night TV advert. Stelios there.
Do check it. Thank you very much.
3XL, you could just wear it as
XXL.
as like just a night shirt.
Fall from an aeroplane, you'll survive.
We have the quantity button here. You can buy 1, you can buy 2, you can buy 3.
You can buy 10.
Yeah.
You really like the design.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow Connor's series, where he talks to lots of prominent people in the Westminster political sphere. Here he's talking to Ben Habib. And if you want to see what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter, where we post links to all of the work we're doing. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.